Welcome to this Logan City Council Libraries podcast. Each year we bring you hot topic presentations, including conversations with writers, artists and creatives. Recorded in front of a live audience, today's conversation is a special Brisbane Writers Festival and the Burbs Logan event. It gives me great pleasure to introduce and welcome Kate Pullinger. Here, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respect to the elders, past and present and future. Before I begin, I'll provide a little bit of background. We're talking sort of mainly about flight paths and landing gear, and the two are interconnected. Landing gear began as a digital online project, storytelling exercise called Flight Paths, and so I thought I'd just give everyone a background to that, and we'll be discussing that later. Kate, you were going to read an excerpt, perhaps, from Landing Gear? Yeah? Would you like to do that?
Good. Thank you, Brad. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming along today. It's not raining right now, but it might rain soon, so being in the library is a good thing. So the library had two of my books on display over there. So Landing Gear, which we talked about, and also The Mistress of Nothing, which is a novel of mine that came out in 2009, which is a historical novel set in Egypt, based on a true story about two English women who go to live in Luxor in 1863. So if you are interested in historical fiction, that's the book for you. But I'm one of those kinds of authors who publishers find mildly annoying, in that I tend to write different kinds of books all the time. So I'll write a supernatural thriller, like my book Weird Sister, a historical fiction like The Mistress of Nothing, or indeed a contemporary novel like Landing Gear. And when I say mildly annoying, what I mean is it's easier for publishers if you stick to one genre and you find you do something well and then you just keep doing it. That's what they want. That's makes them happy. So, but anyway, they still love me despite that. So as Brad mentioned, Landing Gear, which came out, I guess it's 2 years old now. It has a history online as a digital work as well as the novel. So to sort of explain that, I've done a lot of work online in digital media over the last 15 years. So trying to think about new forms of storytelling that the internet might enable. And that's something that I've really been passionately involved with really for the last 15 years. The web page you can see up here is the homepage for a project of mine called Inanimate Alice, which is a digital fiction story for young adults. It's about a girl called Alice who wants to be a games designer when she grows up. So the episodes start with her aged 8, and they progress 1 or 2 years. She gets 1 or 2 years older with each episode. And the episodes have little games embedded in them as well, which, because she wants to be a games designer, they reflect her ability at the age that she is in the episode, if you see what I mean. So episode 1, she's only 8, so the game's very simple. And by episode 6, which we've just published just a couple of months ago, she's, is she 18 or 19? She's 19. And she's at art school learning to be a games developer. And so the level of gameplay in episode 6 is much more complicated than in episode 1. So I just mentioned that because one of our biggest audiences for Inanimate Alice, unusually for a digital project, it's 11 years old. It's been going, we've been working on it since 2005. And one of our biggest and most loyal audiences is in Australia. We've had a lot of interest and some investment from Education Services Australia in Inanimate Alice, and it's a title that's used really widely here in schools and in colleges as well, which has really been a really great thing for us for the project. And in fact, the next sort of the next tranche of new episodes, we're collaborating with an Australian digital artist called Mez Breeze. But that's over the next couple of years. So that's just a sort of little sort of intro to my sort of interest in digital work. But what I thought I would do is just read a short extract from Landing Gear. So can I do two? Can I? Don't ask me to dance at the same time that I'm holding this book and reading and holding the microphone. So this is from the very beginning of the novel. And it's as I said, it's a contemporary novel set in London in the UK, which is where I live. Although you can probably hear I'm not British, I'm Canadian. But I've lived in the UK for a while now. So Jacob in Dubai. So this is in the voice of this character called Jacob, who's a young Pakistani man. I went to Dubai from my home in Pakistan because I heard I could earn good money. There was a man in my village who'd been working in the Emirates. He was injured on the building site where he worked when a section of scaffolding fell on his foot. He had a lot of stories about what life was like in the workers' camps, so I knew what to expect. I liked the look of Dubai. I liked the idea of living in a place where everything was new. The plane was full of men like me, leaving home to work abroad, although I was one of the youngest. When we landed, we were transported to the camp where we were to live. The conditions were not good, too many men, but I was happy, and when I got to the building site the next day, 2 hours by bus, I was happier still. I wanted to work. Now I had a job. Now I would be paid. But it turned out that getting paid for the work I did was not as simple as I thought it would be. So this next section is called Jacob at the Airport, Karachi. At the airport, I followed the instructions Amir had given me, for which I paid the last of my Dubai money, and found the unlocked door that led outside to the planes. I had less than 15 minutes after darkness fell to find the correct airplane. I'd been home from Dubai for a while, but there was no work in Karachi. I told Rahila, my sister, I was going back to Dubai. We spent a long time over our goodbyes. She could tell that something was up, but I told no one my real plans, not even her. We'd lost our parents when we were teenagers, our father in the 2005 Kashmir earthquake, and our mother a year after that, so we were used to finding our own way. Even so, I found it hard not to cry when we parted. From the ground, the planes looked enormous, their lights blinking in the dusk. The air stank of petrol and tires. But I found the plane I wanted, and no one saw me. I climbed over the giant wheels and shimmied up the landing gear and folded myself onto the little shelf, which was exactly where Amir said it would be. So this next section is in the voice of a woman called Harriet, who lives in London. Harriet, driving, London. I have to go to the supermarket today, otherwise my family will starve. Well, not starve exactly. In the event of a war or cataclysm of some kind, there's enough food in the house to last for how long? The pantry, the fridge, the storage jars, the cupboard full of breakfast cereal, the shelf of tins, the peas that have fallen out of their bag and are rolling around in the bottom of the freezer, the tahini that's older than my teenage child. We would last at least 1 month, maybe even 2, before we'd have to eat those jars of red wine preserves given to me several years ago. Except that isn't the point. The fact that there is already a ton of food in my house and I'm on my way to buy more is not the point. While there are plenty of wars and cataclysms happening elsewhere, as far as I can see, stuck as I am in the one-way traffic system, Richmond is its usual placid, well-fed self this week. The family expects meals. They know that ferries do not replenish the cupboards in the night, but how, why, when, and where the food comes from is not something that interests them. It's not something that interests me either, but I am a good wife. I am a good mother. The novel, which was inspired by the stories that there are in the press every once in a while about airplane stowaways who survive their journeys, survive these incredible journeys tucked into landing gear of airplanes. I first read about that in 2001 and became really interested in that particular phenomenon and the kind of foolhardy bravery that it would take to decide to try to leave where you live and go to another place via airplane landing gear. And I really got obsessed with that idea, and that inspired the initial project Flight Paths, and then eventually the novel, which is about what happens when Jakob lands on Harriet's car and how their worlds quite literally collide at that moment.
Worlds colliding is a sort of a theme within the novel, isn't it? Because although it's set mainly in England, there's also Canada plays an important part in it, and of course Pakistan, where Jakob is from. You've also dealt with that a little bit with Inanimate Alice as well, sort of one person moving in between cultures. If I understand right, she's born in China, is that right? And then she moves.
Gosh, where was Alice born? Well, she's certainly because her father works in the oil business. In the first 3 episodes of the story, they move continually. So yeah.
Is that something that you want to revisit in the future, or is it something particular to those two projects?
No, I think that for me, in fact, it's actually kind of one of the themes of The Mistress of Nothing as well, which is about 2 English women in the 19th century who go live in Egypt. And I think for me that it's one of the great subjects, really, the collision of cultures, and also, certainly in the 21st century, the way in which we have, and particularly now in the last 2 years, there's this sense that we have of people on the move all over the world, either trying to get away from a war, trying to get away from bad conditions, or indeed traveling to try to find a better way of life. Yeah. And I just think that's really that's the way it's been probably since the dawn of human history. And I do think it's really one of the great themes of humankind. Yeah.
Perhaps Logan's a good place to discuss it too, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but Logan's a very multicultural area. There's something like 216 different ethnic groups that live in the area.
Wow.
Yeah, and something like a quarter of the people who are currently here were born overseas. So it's a very globalized community. Yeah. So it's really great to have you here talking about some of these themes that sort of would resonate with the community.
Yeah. No, I think it's, like I said, I think it's a really relevant and interesting thing, and one that I've been interested in looking at from all different kinds of angles. And also, I'm an immigrant myself, so. Although Canada's looking very, very good compared to the UK at the moment.
The Prime Minister's easy on the eye too, from what I hear. And my girlfriend's very much enamoured with him. So cultural diversity is an important part of your writing, which is really interesting. It's also, I see an interesting reflection in that also in the diversity of formats. Like you mentioned before, even the diversity of genres that you've approached, which a lot of authors would maybe balk at, the idea of reinventing yourself every time. But there's also a diversity of formats as well that you've tackled with online storytelling, and then you've did a movie adaptation of the movie Piano as well. You've even written a libretto, I should say.
Yes, that's right.
For Dorian Gray. So that's amazing that you do that. Why is diversity or is it adaptability? Why is that so important to you?
I guess, I don't know. I really like working with other people. I really like collaborating on projects. That's something that I really love about working in digital media, and that's also been a lot, a very enjoyable thing about, for instance, the opera libretto, the Dorian Gray opera, the chance to work with a composer, to collaborate with a composer on that work. And I think the reason that I like collaboration is because it's so opposite to the process of writing a novel, where you really have to go into the room and shut the door and shut up and turn off stuff and just write. and it can take several years, and it's solitary, and can be not very fun, and it's difficult, etc. So the chance to work with other people, I find, really just it alleviates the solitude of writing a novel, but it's also I just really like the rapid back and forth of collaboration, which is so different from the process of writing a novel. So that's on the level of collaboration. But I think also when it comes to digital media, I am really just very interested in trying to think about what kinds of new forms of literature are emerging and will continue to emerge as we become more and more used to digital technology, and as it becomes more and more embedded in our lives. I have a real passion for the notion that we need to carve out a space for literature online, as well as all the visual media and all the social media and all all the stuff.
Well, I might take an opportunity to ask you to maybe look into your crystal ball in terms of narrative and technology. Where do you think it's going in the future? Do you think that, let's say, 10, 20 years' time, what new technologies do you think will be impacting upon literature at that point? Or will there be a turn back to sort of, literature with a capital L and the writer in his lofty garret by himself somewhere?
Well, Margaret Atwood always says that the electricity grid's going to fail, and we'll be back to carving on stone before we know it. But I think for me, one of the I think that the advent and the proliferation of the smartphone is quite an amazing thing, really, when you think about how we have these tiny, very powerful computing devices that we carry around with us all the time, and we have such a sort of personal and intimate relationship with our smartphones. And I think that we haven't really started to think about what forms of reading would work best on the smartphone. I mean, we've got ebooks, but they're not native to the smartphone. They're just they're just electronic copies of print, sort of wedged into electronic media. Yeah. They're convenient. So I think that there'll be much more experimenting around trying to think about what is native to the technology. And
that's you're doing that right now. You're writing a novel for the smartphone, in particular, called Jellybone. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's talk about that.
That's a excuse me. That's I'm working with a German startup called Ulipo, who are attempting to rethink serialized fiction in particular for the smartphone. They have backing from a German publisher called Bastelube, and that's a sort of venerable 150-year-old German publisher. And one of the interesting things about that publisher is that, unlike most publishers in the English-speaking world who published serialized fiction in the 19th century, Bastelube kept publishing serialized fiction all throughout the 20th century into the 21st century. So they have some serialized stories and serialized characters who are more than 75 years old. However, they publish them in these little cheap paperback editions that just cost $2 or $3 and that are for sale in carousels in supermarkets and drugstores. And the demographic is kind of 70 plus. So they've got this wealth of content, wealth of material that they're just very interested in trying to think about, well, what would serialized fiction look like in the 21st century? Is the smartphone the reading device of the future? So that's their impetus, and because I'm very interested in digital media and have worked in this area for about 15 years now, they commissioned me to be one of their launch authors for the launch of the platform at the end of October. Okay. Yeah.
So coming up soon. Eh?
Yeah, coming up. It's not finished yet, so yeah.
Well, we talked. But there's also in this novel what I found interesting was also there's a suggestion of the digital divide as well. It's a bit near the end where Jakob reflects upon his time in Pakistan and thinks of the red onions that his family grew, and it's a very simple sort of lifestyle. And I mean there's a TV, in the village, but that's about it kind of thing. That's something that libraries address too, that the digital divide between people who are very, very connected and have all the latest devices and people that maybe don't have many at all. Do you think that's going to be get better or worse in the future?
Oh, that's one prediction too far for me. I don't know. I mean, I think the digital divide is absolutely real, but I also think that that smartphones in particular have bridged that divide in unexpected and interesting ways. True, yeah. Certainly there's been quite a lot of research showing the benefits of smartphone usage in rural parts of certain countries in Africa, et cetera, to do with being able to exchange money rapidly, being able to trade, market trading rapidly, et cetera. So I think that it's a complicated issue, yeah, and one that I'm certainly not an expert in. Yeah. And I'm sure I am one of those people who too easily assume that people have connectivity. I'm certainly one of those people who am incredibly impatient and frustrated whenever I don't have it myself.
There's two of us actually. Yeah. You travelled to Pakistan though, didn't you?
I did. Yeah.
Is it like that? Do we have an image of it as being sort of very simple, sort of very sort of rural area, or is it you saw a range of different lifestyles there? I imagine?
Well, I had such a fantastic trip. I went in, I don't know, I can't remember, 2011, 2012 maybe. I was taken to Pakistan by the British Council to do some creative writing workshops in Karachi and Lahore. It was unnerving because when you go to Pakistan, the British Council gives you travel advice, and it's kind of on the security rating of 1 to 5, it's either 5 or 4. I didn't show it to my husband before I went to Pakistan, this report that they gave me. And when I was in Karachi, I had to go everywhere in an armored vehicle with an armed guard, which is not reassuring. No, so it's a very dangerous place. It's dangerous for people who live there. But it's also just really vibrant, really, I think partly because it's quite unusual for them to have visitors. I was so welcomed, and I just had such a wonderful time and found people really articulate, very engaged with world politics in a way that made me just feel so ignorant. They just really knew geopolitical, just everybody very interested in global politics. Wow. But also it's got a tiny, very affluent class, and then a large bulk of the population who are very poor. It's very feudal, which I wasn't expecting. Right. Yeah, so people, the middle class and upper class, live in the cities, and they own most of the rest of the country. It's very interesting that way. But I also felt strangely at home there because of the large Pakistani population and influence in the UK. So that was interesting as well. But I really value the fact that I was able to go there because it's not a country where you can be a tourist anymore. Yeah, currently.
Yeah. Talking about again that sort of divide with technology, with libraries themselves. Do you think that they will go on to become more and more technologically connected, or do you think they might sort of shift and become more like post-digital sort of havens where people go to get away from this kind of stuff?
Can't they be both?
They can be. Hopefully, they can be.
Yeah. Because I think that's part of the problem with some of the discussion around digital is that people often posit it as an either or, like the digital's going to destroy the book, yes, etc. The digital's going to change libraries. I think you can have both. It doesn't have to be either or. And I think there's fantastic movements in libraries to become to become more connected and more open to the community and more digitally minded overall. You see that in the great libraries all around the world, I think, including here in Australia. I mean, I must say, I think that the State Library of Queensland is one of the most beautiful buildings. It is the most beautiful library I've ever been in. It's a wonderful building. So I feel we were talking about this a bit earlier, maybe I was talking to Nick about how in the UK libraries, public libraries in particular, are really under threat currently.
Yeah, very much so.
And that doesn't seem to be happening here. Doesn't seem to be happening in as much in Canada and the US, but in the UK the situation's quite bad.
Yeah, I've been following that. Yeah. Is there any new projects that you want to speak about that you're working on currently, apart from the
that's what I'm working on.
Yeah,
that's what I'm working on. I'm also trying to write a new sort of traditional, so to speak, novel as well.
Okay.
So that's set in Canada. It's about a bit of my family history. It's about my mother's brother, who was a logger in British Columbia throughout the second half of the 20th century. So it's kind of about peak logging in that period where they were cutting down the old growth trees, and my uncle was a part of that.
Great. Well, I think we might try to open it up to questions from the audience now. Does anyone have any questions? Aaron can take the mic over.
Hey.
Hi.
I was just wondering what aspects of writing between different genres you found most troubling or difficult, or like one of the hardest parts of writing in general.
I think just the business of making a story work in a way that you think people will want to read is quite a tricky thing. It's often that, no matter what genre or form I'm working in, you start with the sort of best version of what you're trying to do in your head, and then what comes out on the paper starts with the worst version of what you were hoping to do, and then you gradually try to lift it up and make it work better. And so that's a process that I enjoy, but it's also a process that is really challenging. And it's also impossible to second guess the market, and it's also impossible to second guess what people will want to read. So you really just have to write about what you're interested in and hope that people will respond to it.
What comes most naturally in terms of formats?
No, I don't think one does more than the other, because they have their own. Some forms are collaborative and others aren't. And like I was saying, I enjoy both of those things. Yeah, I don't know what I would do if I had to choose, but hopefully that'll never happen.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask, with the digital format, it must be hard enough to make a living as a writer anyway, but with digital formats, it must be even harder to sell it, because so much writing on the internet's free. I see there that you've got Arts Council, perhaps it was a grant that helped fund Flight Paths.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The three projects that I put up here, I also put up Letter to an Unknown Soldier, which, if you're interested in, these three projects are all free online, as you said, and they've all had a mixture of funding. Some public funding, some private funding, just a real mixed bag. With Inanimate Alice, so the first 5 episodes are available for free online, and then with this newest episode, episode 6, it's the first time we've started charging for an episode. I do think that business models are emerging now for digital works, and that will just continue to pick up a pace. So the project that I mentioned earlier, Jellybone, the project with the German startup, that's a commercial project. So that story will be sold through their platform. But yeah, all research shows that writers' incomes are diminishing, and it's a problem. But I also think that throughout, over the last 300 years, writers have had to make their living in all different kinds of ways, and that's just what it. There's only a very few writers. I mentioned Margaret Atwood. There are a few writers who can just live from their writing, and the rest of us do all kinds of things. And I think that's just the reality, really. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Hi. Thank you for talking to us. I'm wondering if you have any knowledge of Kindle. I was looking at Kindle, and excuse me. What I can't work out from them is they don't accept photos which are in your book, because the photos come in different sizes on a page, but it will not necessarily fit on your phone or on your PDF or on your on your PC. So I don't even know how that works.
Well, yeah, I'm not a technical expert in that field either. But one thing I do know is that the sort of format behind ebooks is called EPUB, and except Amazon calls it Mobi, but basically it's EPUB. And there's a new generation of EPUB called EPUB 3 that is just being launched and being standardized, and it will be more responsive and more dynamic, and will allow you to put film and video as well as photographs into ebooks. Whether or not that will be, you can view those on a Kindle, which is a specific type of. Yeah.
They only accept a certain particular format.
Yeah.
Which is different from other formats.
Yeah.
You can change them.
Yeah, and the problem, the frustration with Amazon and the Kindle is that it was a great innovation 5 years ago, but they haven't done anything. They haven't done anything with it. No. So it's as though they lost interest in it, as in terms of their they spend so much time developing other stuff, but they've kind of lost interest.
Maybe it's because e-readers themselves have sort of diminished in terms of the smartphone. I've noticed just in the library itself, people coming in to discuss e-readers or speak about e-readers have dropped off very much so. No new e-readers seem to be coming out very much.
No.
The shift now is to have one device, and that's your smartphone.
That's the phone, and EPUB 3 will be a better format for the phone. Yeah.
I guess it's almost moving on from this lady's question. When you're working in this digital thing, how much do you feel obliged to know about the software and how that works? Do you feel the need to do that? Because there are restrictions, such as we've already just heard about. Do you come to know what the digital people are doing? Do you understand the software, or do you just have the idea and tell them to make it work?
Your team of lackeys.
When I first started working in digital media, I realized that I wasn't going to be a programmer, and I wasn't going to be a web designer, and that other people could do those things better than me, and that I would need to collaborate. I would need to work with other people. However, I do feel like I do need to at least understand what they're doing. So, for example, when it comes to creating a work for the smartphone, I'm trying to get to grips with the affordances of the smartphone. So, for instance, it has an accelerometer in it. So if you move the phone around, what effect that will have on what's on the screen. So trying to get to grips with understanding those kinds of things is something that I do. I've been trying to understand blockchain recently, which is the technology behind Bitcoin. So But I would never. I try to understand it as a lay person. You know, I would never attempt to program or anything. That's not where my skill set is, and I'm not that interested in it. I'm just interested in knowing, in understanding it, but not being able to do it. Yeah.
Is there any more questions from the audience? Yep. One more.
Thank you. Hi, welcome. I'm also from Canada. How do you see digital storytelling in terms of businesses sharing their stories? Because I know that video right now has become very live for people online with businesses. So how does digital storytelling look for actually getting that across in a more wider audience and in a more interesting way than, say, live video or just recorded video?
Yeah. Well, I think that the thing that appeals to me about digital fiction or digital storytelling is the way that you can blend media and use text as well. So I'm really interested because I'm a fiction writer. I'm interested in the text and using text on the screen and what happens when you put text on the screen. So that for me is a very different type of form and different experience than watching a video or watching a film. And I'm interested in trying to think about how to use digital media to create what I feel are essentially reading experiences. So like the little piece I showed you, Flight Paths, that is a reading experience. It uses other media, but reading is the primary thing. So that's really where my interest lies. But I mean, I think the other, for big companies, as you're talking about the whole area of personalized narratives, I think is something that we'll see more and more of as certainly as advertising becomes more and more sophisticated as well. I don't know if we'll get to the point where, I don't know if you've seen the movie Minority Report, where as you're walking down the street, the billboard knows that it's you, so speaks to you personally. I don't.
Personalized storytelling.
Yeah.
To appeal particularly to that person.
Yeah.
Or to particular subjects that they're interested in.
And that's in some ways, that's the kind of sinister side of it, really, isn't it? The surveillance culture that digital media has brought along with its more positive sides as well. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Kate, for coming along. We'll have some tea and coffee over there, and it'll be here for another 10 or so minutes. And